It's great to be in this space, as Father Chuck said, to welcome you in our newly renovated church. And also to welcome you to this Pride Eucharist that will begin our Pride celebration and our Welcome Home weekend. My name is Mona West, and I'm on staff here at St. David's. I'm the Director of Adult Christian Formation and have been on staff for about 2.5 years now. So I'm very, very pleased and very honored to be here and to bring the sermon this evening. Many of us will leave this service to walk in the Pride Parade this evening. And I'd like to invite you to think with me a little more deeply about our participation in that parade. Prides in North America began in the mid-18th century. They had their origins in political and military and religious contexts. One historian notes that parades are a distinctive mode of public performance. By marching under a specific rank along a planned route, the parader embodied the group's identities and alliances in the eyes of the mass spectator. This seemingly subtle display was complete with ostentatious decoration, costumes, and classically patriotic symbols which gave parades their air of communal festivity and jubilee. Well, if the last part of that description doesn't sound like a drag show, I don't know. Parades are ritual forms of performance. They express community values and sentiments. And different groups often will compete to define and represent what those values are. For example, we have the Rose Parade in Pasadena, California, which reflects the excess of corporate America. And then there's the Judah Parade. The Judah Parade is also in Pasadena, and it uses costume, parody, satire, and a ritual of rebellion, and we say drag again, against the dominant forces of American society that produced the Rose Parade. Sort of an anti-parade, if you will. So, in the face of oppressive legislation that has strategically attacked the queer community in the state of Texas, especially drag performers and trans people, this parade is more important than ever. Our participation is more than a stroll in downtown Austin. We join with countless others throughout history in a ritual of rebellion, a public performance in solidarity and justice for LGBTQ plus people. So I also want to invite you to think with me a little more deeply about the parable we heard for this evening. That might be hard to do since we become so familiar with it. Jesus' parables were subversive speech to his first century audience. He didn't tell them for their entertainment value. And the word parable actually comes from two Greek words, balo, a verb meaning to throw, and para, which is a preposition which means alongside, to throw alongside. And so drawing on the prophets and the wisdom of his own tradition, Jesus throws these stories alongside the lives of his first century hearers to surprise and to confront. A major way we have domesticated this parable in Luke's Gospel is by calling it the parable of the Good Samaritan, reducing its message to charitable acts and naming nonprofit organizations after it. In her brilliant interpretation of this parable, Jewish New Testament scholar Amy Jill Levine ponders, as far as I'm aware, there are no good Catholic or good Baptist hospitals, and there are no social service organizations called Good Episcopalian, or Good Mexican, or Good Arab. To label a Samaritan any Samaritan, a Good Samaritan, should be in today's climate seen as offensive. It's tantamount to saying, he's a good Muslim, as opposed to all the others in this configuration who would be terrorists. Or, she's a good immigrant, as opposed to all those others in this configuration who are here to take our jobs and scam our welfare system. Interpreters over the years have added to this domestication by identifying the Samaritan as a member of an oppressed group, claiming that in today's society, the one to offer aid would have been a queer, or a person of color, or a woman like Florence Nightingale, who had to struggle in British society to offer nursing training for women of all social classes. Seeing the Samaritan as a member of an oppressed group could be seen as a greeting by the dominant culture. Isn't it nice that some of those people know how to be a neighbor, just like us? But a closer look at the parable indicates that the Samaritan was a person of means, able to travel freely, able to provide money for the ongoing care of the person rescued, and had influence with the innkeeper. In first century reality, the Samaritan would more rightly have been seen as an oppressor, not the oppressed. And those of us who have worked with this parable, we know that part of its historical context has to do with the enmity between Jews and Samaritans. There's a long history of hatred in the Bible between these two groups who shared the same God and the same scriptures. For Jesus' first century Jewish audience, they would have been expecting the third person in the story to have been a Jew, not a despised Samaritan. The shocking response of this parable to the lawyer's question, "Who is my neighbor?" which could also be read, "Who is not my neighbor?" or "Who do I not have to love?" is that enemies can be compassionate too. Enemies can be examples of mercy. So, in our cultural context, what does this parable throw alongside us who are gathered for Pride Eucharist? In order to answer that question, I think we have to get in the ditch. Jesus' audience would have assumed the wounded person in the ditch was a Jew, and on some level, the person in the ditch would have accepted the care of the Samaritan. I'm sure that many of us can identify with the person in the ditch. The current legislation that has come out of the Texas Senate has robbed us of our agency, stripped us of our rights, and denied access to gender-affirming health care, which has left some of us half alive. What if the place of challenge for us in this parable is acknowledging that those who voted for this legislation and those who agree with it can be compassionate? What if the place of challenge for us in this parable is accepting care and help from those we consider our enemy? Republicans, Democrats, queer people, white cisgender heterosexuals. What if the view from the ditch is really about the collapse of the binary between good and evil, enemy and neighbor? I mean, don't we know a thing or two about being non-binary? Marjorie Gerber, in her book, Vested Interests, Cross-Dressing and Cultural Anxiety, claims that cross-dressers, transvestites, people in drag create a third term which causes a crisis of category that questions binary thinking. And what's important about this third term is that it's not a fixed identity. It's a mode of articulation. It's a place of possibility. Let me say that again. What's important about this third term is that it's not a fixed identity. It's a mode of articulation, a way of describing a place of possibility. Did you notice how the structure of the parable changed when we got to the third character? The priest and the Levites see the man and they pass by on the other side. The Samaritan comes near, sees the man, is moved with pity, goes to the man, tends his wounds, and puts him on his own animal. Something happened to the Samaritan and the wounded man in that ditch. In the act of giving and receiving compassion, in the act of touching wounds and the embrace of a half-dead, naked body, there was a crisis of category. Neither enemy nor neighbor, a space of possibility opened. The ditch is a fluid space, a liminal space, a generative space, a place to risk compassion, offering it and receiving it. Jesus tells the lawyer to go and do likewise. And this parable isn't just about offering aid to those who need it. It's not just about being more kind or even claiming that our enemies can be our neighbors. This parable challenges us to continually create a third term, to create crises of categories, an ongoing space of possibility for compassion that knows no binaries. Amen.